Hi, friends. It's Lisa Hetrick, illustrator for Gina K Designs, and I'm so grateful you could join me today. I have a fun tutorial today. This is part 2 of our patterned backgrounds tutorial. I've already shared part 1, and I'll link that up in the description and the card up in the right-hand corner. I wanted to create this 4-part series to just kind of go through some of the techniques that you can use to create your patterned backgrounds for your card fronts. So I'm showing a couple examples here, and if you watched part 1, you saw some of these examples as well of how I've used different stamps in my collection to create different kinds of backgrounds, from really dense backgrounds with lots of imagery to really simple backgrounds. I like to make the stamps the star of the show. So I'm using all of my stamps all the time to create the different elements for my card projects. And this technique is super simple and one of my favorite ways to just create gorgeous cards with lots of layers and texture without a lot of extra dimension. So we're going to dive into the supplies. I have some Gina K Designs layering white cardstock cut to 4¼ by 5½, and I have a bunch of different stamps from my collection in the Gina K Designs line. And I've got lots of different stamps with silhouettes and line art, and I'm going to be using different ones in my collection throughout this tutorial. I'm using a bunch of Gina K Designs inks, but the main thing is that I've got lights to darks in my ink selection. So let's get a little geeky and talk about design for a minute. If you've watched part 1 and you've watched this section, it'll be very similar. So if you want to move ahead, you can go right ahead to the project, which will be right after this section. So for pattern design, I like to think of things in clusters of 3s, and I'm always thinking about working from the top left to the middle right to the bottom left, and creating and stamping in clusters to create that visual triangle. And every time I do it, and it depends on the stamps, the proportion of the stamps and what kind of stamps there are, I can get different effects. But if you keep this really simple technique in mind as we move forward, you're going to have great success. Okay, we're diving in, and I am using the You Anchor Me stamp set. Now we're going to do a pattern design with just one stamp. Now this stamp is a line art stamped image, but it has some depth to it because the lines are a little bit thicker. So overlapping this image is going to create some really different looks. Now in number 1, in the first video, I used a couple different kinds of images to kind of fill out my pattern. This pattern, we're going to focus on one stamp and 3 colors. And I've got a little bit of a surprise that's going to happen in there too. So going to go ahead and get started. And again, I'm using Sea Glass and Ocean Mist and Tranquil Teal from the Gina K line. So we're going to start with the upper left-hand corner. I'm getting the stamp nice and juicy, and maybe a little too juicy in a couple spots. You can see me kind of cleaning it off a little bit. But this stamp also has that heart shape in it. So if it's important to you to have that shape go upward, just keep that in mind. I just kind of go rogue with that shape. And I'm not worried if the heart's upside down or sideways or left or right. So you can see that I started with my lightest color. I was in the upper left-hand corner. Then I moved to the center right, and then the bottom. Now I've cleaned off my stamp, and I'm going to go back in with a new color. And this time I'm going to bring in Wild Dandelion. Now, I've already gone rogue with the colors so far, but the reason why is I'm going to look at these 3 areas of clusters, and I'm going to overlap my next stamped image of the Wild Dandelion to the side of each one of these blooms. And you can see that we've got our clusters going, our 3 clusters of stamped images. But the reason why I brought in Wild Dandelion is I really love the Gina K Designs ink and how they layer over top of each other. So where that blue and that yellow meets, you get green. And it just adds another layer of color dimension to your project without adding that height that I'm always talking about. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with Ocean Mist. And I'm going to follow my same technique that I've done so far, which is working in those clusters. So I have two options for that top area, and I have two options for the other two areas as well. So I'm just going to use a little intuition here. I'm going to go to the top and bring in that Ocean Mist and let it layer over top of that wild dandelion, coming to that bottom middle right, and then again down to that bottom. So you can see that the flower shapes still have their three distinctive clusters, but we're starting to fill in the paper. Now you could stop here, run this through your die cutter, use one of the master layouts, and shampoo, you have a card base. But I'm going to move ahead and I'm going to add Tranquil Teal to the mix. We've gotten our two light blues. We've added some yellow in here. I'm going to work in my three clusters here, add some Tranquil Teal, and Tranquil Teal is a much darker color. And because of where I'm going to position it, it will automatically and visually to our eye come forward because I'm stamping it over top, but it's also darker color. So you can see how those threes and how immediately it popped. It really just kind of popped out. So we've got that look and feel of flowers that are going backward and flowers that are coming forward. And that's all because of the different layers of color. We've used those blues and we've got lights to darks, and I've thrown that yellow in to give it a little bit of an extra contrast and a little bit of a different pop. So automatically we look like we have quite a bit going on in this pattern with one stamp, and it's so super simple. And again, the stamps are the star of the show. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do something. I'm going rogue again. And I'm bringing in Innocent Pink. So I'm going back to a lighter color, but I made a little bit of a faux pas, which turned out to be kind of a happy accident, which I love happy accidents. I didn't quite clean off the Tranquil Teal, and I ended up creating a new purple violet tone color with my technique here of working in these clusters. And that's okay. I'm digging it. I'm loving this extra little bit of an ombre look that I've gotten with the color. Now you could just use Innocent Pink or your light pink straight up and it would be good to go. But if you're a little rogue like me and just kind of forget to clean off the stamp and you pop it down into that Innocent Pink, everything's going to be okay. Because look at this pattern. The stamps are the star of the show here, and it's one stamp out of the whole set. So you can mix and mash all of the other stamps over top of this, create embellishments in that middle, or just use this as is and add a little sentiment strip to it, and you are good to go. I am loving it. So here on the left was the pattern that I did in the first video. And here's a sneak peek at the last two patterns that I'll be doing in part 3 and part 4, where we're working with solids and working with a lot more line art images and positioning them to create your patterns as well. So I look forward to seeing you in part 3 of the next pattern video. Head over to my website at indigojadeart.com/craftyourjoy and grab all of my stamp set freebies. Thanks so much for watching. Please consider sharing the joy by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. And I'm sharing more card and watercolor tutorial videos for your inspiration right here. So come on in and take a peek at my tutorials. I have a lot to share, and I'll see you next time.